My 39-year-old female ex-husband, 40-year-old male, and I were together for close to 10 years. We'll call him Andy. Andy and I have 2 kids together, an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. We've been separated since September of 2022. No plans to divorce anytime soon due to costs and time, and we've handled the custody situation ourselves. I get the kids throughout the week, and he gets them on the weekends. We live about 5 minutes away from each other, each of us living with family. Andy started dating this girl who lives about 2 hours away, less than a year ago. Let's call her Bridget. Bridget has a 9-year-old boy named Jacob and comes up on weekends. I had no issues with her. I did not try to get to know her personally, but I know what the kids have told me, and she seemed to be really good to them, and that's all that mattered to me. We were not enemies or anything like that, just kinda indifferent towards each other. She came to my kids' birthday parties I threw for them, and I thought all was well. That is until a few weeks ago. It was Saturday, and Andy sent me a text telling me he had just left the ER and he had the flu. I went to pick the kids up as soon as possible. On the way home, I was asking my daughter what she had done that day, and she replied it was just like every other weekend. She played with Jacob and her brother, she did makeup with Bridget, and then they took a bath. The way she said it made me feel the need to ask if they each took their own baths or if Bridget stayed in the bathroom to help if needed. That's when my daughter tells me that they take a bath shower together all the time. My mom was in the car too, and judging from her face, I knew I wasn't overreacting by being absolutely speechless about what I had just heard. But not wanting to cause a scene, I didn't make a big deal about it, but I did tell my daughter that I didn't want her to ever take another bath with Bridget ever again. I was so blown away. I have a history of being sexually abused by a close family member throughout my whole childhood. He's dead now. I always said I would never put my kids in a position where that might happen. In fact, my kids have never been left alone with anyone other than my ex and me and our parents. Come to find out, though, Andy had been working on Saturday afternoons, leaving them with Bridget, which is when the baths occurred. Andy was well aware of what was happening, though. Given the flu diagnosis and my emotions being so high, I waited until the next day to say something about it. I asked what was up with his girlfriend and why the heck would she want to take baths with my child, and why would he sit back and let it happen? That's when he tried to act like my daughter was to blame. We'll name my daughter Lennox and my son Asher. So he starts trying to tell me how Lennox just goes in there when Bridget is in the shower, and she begs her to let her in. I don't believe that for 1 second, but I just told him that they make door locks for a reason, and if the girl didn't want Lennox to be in there with her, she wouldn't be, simple as that. I also made sure to let him know just how unreasonable, inappropriate, and predatory the whole thing seemed to me. I mean, in what world is any 30-something woman going to actively want to take a bath with an 8-year-old girl, and it not be for nefarious reasons? Andy already had 2 kids when we got together, and coincidentally enough, they were the same age then as my kids are now. I reminded him how in all our years together, they never so much as saw me in my underwear, let alone be naked in a room with me, and just how gross that is, and how much my sense of safety for the kids when they are with him has been shattered. He said it would never happen again. I said if it did, I wouldn't call to talk about it again. So 2 weeks went by, and my kids were on spring break. Lennox wanted to stay at Andy's Monday night, but Asher wanted to come home, so we picked him up. After being home for a few hours, before dinner started, I was putting things away in my closet, and Asher was sitting on the staircase right beside me. Out of the blue, he tells me that Bridget doesn't sleep with clothes on. I asked him how he knew that. He said he saw it. Once again, my mother was there to hear it too. Instead of waiting, I immediately went to the phone where I asked him why he's trying to date a child toucher, because now my other child is talking about his girlfriend's female genitalia too. Of course, it's all a misunderstanding. Asher is making a bigger deal about it than it really is. He said that she was wearing his boxers, and they happened to ride up. To which I replied by asking if her female genitalia was that big that it would be hanging out of some shorts that rode up. I also reminded him that I too have a female genitalia, and I love shorts. Being 5'10" inches all legs, I know all about shorts riding up, and never once have I worried about my female genitalia hanging out. Also, he only wears boxer briefs, so if she really was wearing his, then that must mean her female genitalia is too big to be contained, and that this is the very last time I will ever hear about this woman's body from my kids again, and that I do not want this predator around my kids. Bridget hasn't been up here the last 2 weekends, but she and Andy both have been crying to Lennox about how it's all my fault that she can't come up here to see her anymore. Am I the idiot? Doesn't this seem really suspicious? Or do I just think twisted, as Andy has tried to say? Edit. We live in the USA. She was born and raised in the South. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I understand bathing with a young child you're a caretaker of because it's easier to get wet on purpose than have all your clothes wet and have a backache when you need to help them. It also makes sense to wash yourself while the toddler is with you so they don't hurt themselves while you're in a bath. But I cannot see a reason to bathe with an 8-year-old, one you're not related to, and whose father you've been dating for less than a year. I'd call for emergency custody or something. Definitely would contact a lawyer to start collecting evidence so you can put a stop to that as quickly as possible. I'd advocate for supervised visits. This behavior is dangerous. Comment 2. Choosing the time your ex is at work to bathe with your young child is just weird. If he's only gone for one afternoon during the weekend, that's literally the worst time to bathe one child. Even if for some reason your daughter legitimately needed help bathing, why would anyone want to do that during the one block of time without another adult there to tend to the other kids? Who leaves a 5-year-old unsupervised to do that? There's no legitimate reason for it. You're right to be concerned, and this deserves a long conversation with your lawyer. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. Well, things escalated quickly after my last update. I thought I had made myself clear to Andy, but apparently he's got a thick skull. Last Tuesday, I got a call from Lennox's school. She was in the nurse's office crying, saying she had a stomachache. I left work immediately. When I got there, Lennox was a mess. She eventually told me that she didn't want to go to her dad's anymore because Bridget made her uncomfortable. My blood boiled. I confronted Andy right outside the school, in front of God and everyone. I told him that his girlfriend was not to be around my kids, period. He tried to defend Bridget, saying she was just affectionate, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. I reminded him of my past, how I knew the signs, and that I wouldn't let history repeat itself with my own children. The argument got heated, and Andy's true colors showed. He accused me of trying to control his life, even after our separation. I shot back, telling him that when it comes to our kids, I'll do whatever it takes to protect them. The school principal had to step in and ask us to leave the premises. I thought that was the end of it, but no. Andy had to go and make things worse. He filed for full custody, claiming I was an unstable mother, poisoning our kids against Bridget. He even had the nerve to bring up my past abuse as a reason for my irrational fears. That hit me hard. I felt betrayed, and I couldn't believe he'd stoop so low. The custody battle was ugly. Andy dragged my name through the mud, but I had one thing he didn't: the truth. During the hearing, Lennox spoke to the judge privately. She was brave, told the judge everything about Bridget's behavior. Asher was too young to testify, but the judge took his experiences into account too. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Andy's face when the decision was announced was something I'll never forget. He realized too late that he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. The judge granted me full custody with supervised visits for Andy. Bridget was not to be anywhere near my kids. I thought that was closure, but life had another curveball for me. Last weekend, during his first supervised visit, Andy showed up alone. He said Bridget had left him, couldn't handle the drama. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that she was gone, but anger that it took all this for him to see what was right in front of him. The aftermath was tough on Lennox and Asher. They were confused, hurt by their father's actions. I spent a lot of time talking with them, reassuring them that they were safe now. We started therapy, and it's helping, but it's going to be a long road to healing. And then, just when I thought we could start moving forward, Andy's parents got involved. They accused me of turning their son against them, said I was the reason their family was falling apart. They demanded to see the kids, but I stood my ground. The judge's order was clear supervised visits for Andy, and that didn't include his parents. It's been a week of high emotions and tough conversations. I've had to be the bad guy, the protector, and the comforter all at once. but through it all, I know I did the right thing for my kids. They're my world, and I'll fight tooth and nail to keep them safe. Thanks for reading. My daughter's bio mom sobered up after years of neglect and thinks she can waltz back into her life, but I fought for full custody and showed her who's daddy. Hey, so I'm a 32-year-old man. This all started when I was 19, and I met a girl who I'm gonna call Lucy. Lucy was 24 and had a 2-year-old from a previous relationship. I was against meeting the child at first as I was young and immature. I was worried that I'd have to play dad. Little did I know that the little girl would change my life in the best way. I met her when she was 2 after 6 months of dating Lucy. We bonded instantly. I'm going to refer to her as Bonnie for the rest of this as well. Honestly, I love being a dad and all the dad activities that come with it. However, when Bonnie turns 3, Lucy started drinking and using substances. It didn't take long for things to get dangerous. I loved her and tried my best to support her and Bonnie. 5 months before Bonnie turns 4, Lucy has been hospitalized and has been told by social services and the police that if she doesn't go to rehab or some sort of treatment center, Bonnie will go into care. She flips out and eventually agrees. I managed to convince them to let me have Bonnie, and I promise that once she's clean, we can raise Bonnie together. In the moment, I meant that. However, Lucy didn't get clean. She left rehab after maybe a week each time. She did this numerous times and went to stay with different people that would feed her habit. She never called to check on Bonnie. We'd had one conversation in the entirety of the time she'd been gone, and that was just her saying she wanted to be single. I said I thought that was best and she needed to focus on her recovery. Then radio silence for months. The night of Bonnie's 5th birthday, she showed up to the flat. She had someone waiting for her outside in a car. I don't really remember who it was, as this was 10 years ago now. She demanded I hand Bonnie over to her. I said no. I had emergency guardianship over her at this point, and Lucy was off her face on God knows what. She began screaming at me the most hurtful things. I didn't retaliate as Bonnie was in the next room and the walls were thin. She went on for ages about how she never loved me. She'd been cheating on me since we'd gotten together. Loads of stuff about my own trauma. Still, I kept telling her she needed to leave. She kept screaming at me, threatening me. She threatened to take Bonnie and unalive her so I'd never see her again, and tried to barge past me. I pushed her back. She punched me in the face. I closed the door on her and called the police. They arrested her as when they arrived, she was trying to pick the lock. She left us alone for, I'd say, around a year after that point. I decided to move to a different part of the country before Bonnie started school due to better job opportunities and better school reviews and results. I had family there that would be a good support system. Aunts and cousins with kids Bonnie's age. I did get calls from Lucy after this accusing me of hiding her child. I'd always just hang up. When Bonnie was still 5, I began the legal process of adopting her and changing her last name to mine. Lucy's parental rights had been revoked by the court, so it was an easy process. I'm aware this is very long-winded, so I'm going to wrap it up here quickly. When Bonnie was 8, I met my now wife, and then 3 years later we were married and expecting our first child together. 2 years later, Marie, my wife, adopted Bonnie as well. And 1 year after that, we had our last child. Life was swell, and it still is for the most part. I'm very happy, as are all my children. However, Lucy has gotten in touch. She's sober now and wants custody back. I don't legally have to do anything, but I did offer visitation. She said no, Bonnie was hers, and I promised years ago. Again, over a decade has passed. She said I'd let my own feelings towards her affect my decision when no, I hadn't. The way I see it is, Bonnie has been my child for 13 years. She is 15 now. She is my daughter, and I love her with all my heart, as does her little sister and brother and Marie. Her life is here and she wouldn't want to leave, but I did promise, and I know addiction is a disease. However, I'm not willing to let my daughter go. Visitation is as far as I'll go. However, some of Lucy's family have reached out and said that she deserved the chance to be a mom now. I'm unsure. Any advice is welcome. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You made that promise before she screamed about unaliving her child as a toddler, before asking for this exact thing. She's 15 years old. Give it a few years and Bonnie can make her own decisions. but she can't seriously expect to take her and uproot her whole life so your ex can pretend she never messed up hers. Comment 2. Not the idiot, Lucy was given many chances and she failed time and time again. I think it is kind of you to allow visitations. How does Bonnie feel about this? Does she even want to see or be around Lucy? I don't think you should in any way give up your parental rights to her, nor allow Bonnie to stay with her. Now for the update. Hey, I know this is really long, and I appreciate anyone who reads it all. Thank you. So the past month has been pretty up and down. After Lucy's family started pressuring me about giving her a chance to be a mom, things escalated quickly. I got a call from an old friend who said Lucy had been asking around about where I lived. Next thing I know, she's at my doorstep, unannounced, demanding to see Bonnie. I was caught off guard, and Bonnie was home. It was a mess. Bonnie didn't even recognize her, and Lucy broke down right there on the porch. It was hard to watch, but I stood my ground. No way was I letting her just waltz back into Bonnie's life after all this time. But then my wife, Marie, she started to feel for Lucy. Said maybe we should consider letting her have some contact. Marie's always been the compassionate one, and I guess part of me wondered if I was being too harsh. So we agreed to supervised visits, thinking it might be good for Bonnie to know her biological mom, now that Lucy was sober. The first visit was awkward. Bonnie was polite, but distant. Lucy tried too hard, brought gifts, and kept trying to hug her. Bonnie wasn't having it. She's a smart kid, knows her own mind. After the visit, she told us she didn't want to see Lucy again. Said it felt wrong, like she was a stranger. That should have been the end of it, right? But Lucy wouldn't let up. She started showing up at Bonnie's school, at her soccer games. It was like she was trying to insert herself into Bonnie's life by force. The school called me, concerned. I was furious. I told Lucy to back off, but she accused me of breaking my promise from years ago. She said I was the reason she couldn't connect with her daughter. Then, one day, Bonnie didn't come home from school. My heart stopped. I called everyone, the school, her friends, the police. Hours later, they found her at a diner with Lucy. Bonnie was fine, just shaken up. Lucy had convinced her to go talk, said it was urgent. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I'd failed to protect my daughter. I got a restraining order against Lucy after that. It was a tough decision, but I had to put Bonnie's safety first. Marie was supportive, but I could tell she was torn. She kept saying things like, "What if Lucy really has changed? Or shouldn't everyone get a second chance?" It made me doubt myself. But then the real bombshell dropped. Lucy filed for custody. She had a lawyer, documents claiming she was fit to be a mother, and a sob story that could sway a judge. I was blindsided. How could she think she had any right after all this time? After everything she'd put us through? The court date was set, and I was a wreck. I didn't want to drag Bonnie through this, but I couldn't just give up. The day of the hearing, Lucy was there, all cleaned up and playing the part of a remorseful mother. Her lawyer was slick, talking about second chances and redemption. I could see the sympathy in the judge's eyes. When it was my turn, I spoke from the heart. I talked about Bonnie, about our family, about the life we'd built. I didn't know if it was enough. Then they asked Bonnie to speak. She was brave, said she didn't want to live with Lucy, that she didn't know her. It was powerful. The judge ruled in our favor. No custody for Lucy, but they granted her visitation rights supervised once a month. I was relieved, but also worried. What if Lucy tried something again? What if next time Bonnie didn't come home? After the ruling, Lucy approached me outside the courtroom. She was crying, saying she just wanted to be part of Bonnie's life. I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should give her a chance to prove herself. So I made a decision. I told Lucy we could try unsupervised visits, against my better judgment. I thought I was doing the right thing, being fair. But I had this nagging feeling in my gut that I was making a mistake. It's been a few weeks since then, and Lucy's had one unsupervised visit. It went okay, I guess. Bonnie's still wary, but she's trying. I'm watching like a hawk, though. I can't shake the feeling that I've opened the door to something I won't be able to close. Thanks for sticking with me through this. My family mocked my fiancé for crying. So I cut them off and left them to fend for themselves when karma hit hard. I am 26 years old. I grew up in a family where it was taught that males shouldn't show emotions and that they should be strong. Dad didn't even cry at my grandpa's funeral. As a result of this teaching, my dad barely gave me and my brother much affection. He was especially hard on my brother. If my brother got upset to the point of crying, my dad would make fun of him and told him to man up. Sadly, my brother now has this same mentality. I used to think my dad didn't love me. My mother used to say it's just the way he is. I moved away after university and met my fiancé, Jackson, who is 27 years old. He is the complete opposite of my dad. He is very affectionate and has no problem expressing his emotions. I was happy when he asked me out. He literally had to teach me that it's okay if a male expresses his emotions. We have been together for 4 years, and he proposed to me. During this time, I never took him to meet my family because I made excuses for him not to meet them. I already knew how my family would react to him. They knew we were dating, but they only saw him on video calls. And even then, I made the calls as short as possible, so they didn't really know him. He eventually confronted me about not meeting them, and I finally told him the truth, and he was rightfully upset with me. But he said he will respect my feelings. But he did warn me one day I'm going to have to face them with him. That happened a week ago after he proposed to me. I told my parents we were engaged. Dad said they will be coming to visit me because they wanted to meet Jackson in person. That almost made me panic, but Jackson was beside me and he was holding my hand, and I agreed. I was tense when they arrived. Dad was his normal self. Dad seemed to approve of Jackson, and I relaxed. It happened on the 3rd day when Jackson got a call from his sister, and she told him that his gran had a stroke. Jackson is very close to his gran, and he started crying while on the call. I comforted him and told him we can go see her when my dad suddenly appeared in the living room and looked at Jackson with this look of disgust on his face. I've seen this look so many times over the years growing up. He told him to be a real man and that only babies cry, and he doesn't want his daughter to marry a weak, pathetic man. Jackson was shocked. I got very angry and told Dad to get out. He just stood there and told me emotions are weak, and he will not allow me to marry someone so weak. Things got heated and I threatened to call the police, and my mother finally intervened and said they will go. I told them I wanted nothing to do with them. It didn't take long before my family started calling and texting, telling me it was rude to kick my parents out and I needed to apologize to them. I said I will not and blocked them. My brother then texted and said, "Am I really willing to cut our parents out over something that silly?" I cried. I haven't told Jackson because he has enough to deal with his gran. I am feeling guilty about this whole thing. Am I the idiot for wanting to cut my family off? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Your father is so unbelievably broken as a man that even trying to talk about this is pointless. He was raised to be a rude, angry bully. He crossed so many lines doing this, in someone else's home no less. Only a genuine psychopath would think like him. Comment 2. Not the idiot. A great example of toxic masculinity. The dad, instead of apologizing and not being a jerk, is crying like a child to family. If you want to stay in contact, you need rules. He doesn't like it? He can forget seeing his grandkids. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. So after I blocked my family, I thought that was the end of it. But no, life had more in store. A couple of days later, I got a call from my mom. She was crying, saying my dad had a heart attack. My world stopped. I felt cold all over. I unblocked everyone and rushed to the hospital. Jackson, bless him, drove us there without a word, even though he was still dealing with his grand situation. We got there, and my dad was in the ICU. The doctors said it was serious. My mom was a mess. And even my brother, Mr. Tough Guy, had tears in his eyes. Seeing my dad like that, hooked up to machines, it did something to me. I couldn't help it. I started crying too. And you know what? My brother didn't say a thing. He just put his arm around me. That night, my dad woke up. He couldn't speak much, but he looked at me and Jackson. He saw us holding hands, and he did something I never thought I'd see. He reached out and took Jackson's hand. No words, just a nod. It was like he finally understood. But then, as if things couldn't get more complicated, Jackson's phone rang. It was his mom. His gran had passed away. He broke down, right there in the ICU. And my dad, the man who'd always preached toughness, squeezed Jackson's hand. It was like he was trying to give him strength. I was torn between my fiancé and my dad, but I stayed by Jackson's side. We decided to go to his gran's funeral. When we got back, my dad was out of the ICU, and things were different. He apologized to Jackson, said he was wrong about him. I couldn't believe it. It was like those soap operas where the villain has a change of heart. But this was real life. We started to mend things, slowly. Jackson and I were planning the funeral for his gran, and my family was helping. It was weird, everyone being on the same page for once. But then my brother pulled me aside. He told me he'd been gambling, a lot. He owed money to some really bad people, and they were threatening him. He was scared, and he didn't know what to do. I was furious. How could he be so irresponsible? But he was my brother, and I couldn't turn my back on him. Jackson and I talked it over, and we decided to help him pay off the debt. It took a huge chunk out of our savings for the wedding, but what else could we do? The day we met the loan sharks to pay them off, it was tense, but we got through it. My brother was safe, and he swore he'd get help for his gambling problem. I wanted to believe him, I really did. And now here we are. My dad's recovering, Jackson and I are trying to rebuild our savings, and my brother's attending meetings for his addiction. It's been, well, interesting, but somehow, we're getting through it. I guess sometimes life throws you curveballs and you just have to catch them as best you can. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!